Megan Ottolini here at the Boston Herald. I'm joined by Chief Investigative Reporter Jack Encarnacao. We're covering the latest from Tropical Storm Harvey, which continues to devastate much of Texas, including the Houston area. Just some of the facts right now, 17,000 people are in shelters across the state. Houston police say that they've rescued more than 3,400 people. Officials said Monday that more than 6,000 people have been rescued in all, and it's still raining in Houston. More than 42 inches have fallen in the area, according to the National Weather Service. Some estimates show as much as 48 inches have fallen since the storm start, looking like this storm could shatter rainfall records already held by Houston. President Trump is visiting Texas today, and here in New England, people are making their own efforts to help out, with Patriots owner Robert Kraft pledging up to $1 million, matching donations to the Red Cross. And the city of Boston is asking residents to bring clothing and necessary items to city buildings to donate to Houston residents today through Thursday. But now I want to turn to some extreme weather implications for our city, Boston. Jack, you spoke with some climate change experts about our own city's readiness in the face of these extreme weather natural disasters. And I want to ask you what you heard from them and how it relates to a proposition for this $10 billion hurricane barrier out in the harbor.
Yeah, and $10 billion would just be kind of the starting point for potential cost estimates. This is obviously a long way away, but there are predictions and modeling that are going on around the next century and how much sea level rise we can expect in Boston as a result of melting glaciers and climate change. And it's not a joke, and it's not something that responsible folks would put off planning for. And so that planning is very much underway. The modeling has a wide range as far as how much sea level rise we can expect in the next 100 years, up to 2100. The outside number is as much as 7 feet higher water. The inside number is 3 feet. In the next 50 years, as much as maybe 5 inches more sea level in Boston. And so areas on the coast, like East Boston and Charlestown in particular, are really in need of different types of barriers right now. And there's all kinds of planning going around parks, open space, things like that are shorter term fixes but also have a public use and a public utility, sort of barriers designed to look like parks in a lot of cases, and berm and things of that nature. But when it comes to the outside barrier, that's a really long-term solution of basically blocking storm surge from reaching the harbor by building almost like a half-circle barrier out from where Logan Airport is. There's 3 different scenarios contemplated as far as how far out they want to protect. You could connect one from where Logan is to around where the JFK Museum is in Dorchester. You could go further and start out on the outside of Winthrop, sort of north of the airport, and go all the way down to Quincy and Neponset Bay there. Or you could go as far out as Winthrop out to Hull, which would be
that's quite
a wide scope.
Extensive.
So, how far out does the storm surge need to be kept at bay in the event of, what they call a 100-year storm, which means in any given year over the next 100 years, statistically, there's a 1% chance you'll get that storm.
Are the climate change experts that you spoke with particularly concerned with these types of storms, a 1 in 100-year storm hitting Boston?
Absolutely, they are. Unlike Texas in their Gulf Stream warm weather, we won't probably have a hurricane that sits above us in our lifetimes or anybody's lifetime in this particular part of the country that just beats down consistently with rain and doesn't move along. If it reaches us, that means it's fast moving to begin with and is sort of resilient through the different jet stream that would slow a hurricane down before it gets here. So while we wouldn't get the persistent pounding, it would move very quickly. And what that means is a lot less time to prepare and be ready for the rising of the sea levels. I talked to an MIT expert who's a leading thinker in this field, and he worries about the Charles River because as it is right now, it's uncomfortably close to going over the ground level at this point. Mm-hmm. It's drained and kept in equilibrium by 6 diesel-powered engines along the Charles. And in a particularly fast storm surge, those things could fail, and it wouldn't take all that much water and a surge of fresh water into the Charles without technology to push it down. That could flood the MIT area. East Cambridge could easily flood.
What about over the Esplanade in that Storrow Drive?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And downtown is sort of after East Boston and Charlestown as the place is thought to be most pressing. And this is just parts of Charlestown, the very edge. The East Boston Greenway, where Ryan Playground is in Charlestown. Those are sort of the first places they expect to reach the kind of flooding that needs planning now. Downtown coming after that, in that area as well.
So what would this hurricane barrier do exactly? Can you describe just how this water surge would happen in a hurricane or a tropical storm of very strong magnitude?
Sure. It essentially blocks tidal flow, so that if we build a model that opens and closes to allow boats to come in and out, because there's a lot of uses to that harbor that have to be considered here. There will be a lot of impacts to putting a barrier there, because that's a very active harbor. You've got boat races, you've got all kinds of educational programs, you've got ecological concerns that need to be taken into consideration. But essentially what it would do is block storm surge, block you don't want to call them tsunami waves, because that's a little dramatic, but think of a tsunami and think about wide waves cresting and rushing towards the harbor. If there's a barrier there, a physical barrier that can block those and keep them at bay, that's what a hurricane barrier does. There actually is one down in New Bedford, Massachusetts, off the coast that was built in the 60s after a hellacious hurricane there. And that essentially opens and closes on a predictable pattern. And when it's closed, it's supposed to be able to handle a 100-year storm and keep it away from reaching the harbor.
How likely is it that this will get enough political backing or popular support to actually go into a plan? I mean, it seems, unfortunately, like we'd almost need to see another big New England storm for this to really hit home. I mean, we see this in Texas, but it's a completely different region of the country.
Yet again, different storm dynamics, where it wouldn't feel maybe as torturous, and the rain wouldn't be as heavy. The rain is always going to be faster moving in hurricanes that reach New England than down there in the Gulf Stream area. But yeah, of course, like any major investment, public investment, it's going to take widespread tragedy before people are compelled to spend the money, and before people who otherwise would be flies in the ointment have to stand back and recognize that this is needed. Yeah, there will have to be a body count, unfortunately. And when it comes to the 1938 hurricane that we had here, that's kind of the flashpoint one that led to the widespread, wide-scale property damage. It sort of was New England's version of what we're seeing right now with Harvey. It probably would take something that aggressive and damaging to move the public to spend. Again, that $10 billion is just a starting point. It's going to be much more than that.
Well, you can imagine with the different plans that you laid out, just taking something from Winthrop the whole, that is a massive area. Right now, you spoke a little bit before about some of the steps that the city is really putting in place to secure these vulnerable areas for peace of mind for people. What concrete things are they doing? Well,
they are right now by October studying and will release by October precisely what they think are the best solutions for the area of the East Boston Greenway and that part of Charlestown I talked about, which again are sort of their front burner concerns right now. And it'll probably be some sort of park that's built to essentially be a flood wall, but also has a public utility and can be seen and received and used as a public asset, a place to walk your dog, a playground, whatever it might be, but is also structured at the shoreline such that it would prevent flood surges. So that's in the short term what they're looking at. Of course, then it becomes a question of how to pay for it, and there are all kinds of different ideas on how to do that. You can extract it from development. You can have developers by ordinance, perhaps, set aside money to build these kind of things if they're closer to the water. You can go to the philanthropic community, which has been very interested in this. One of the things about climate change is people in philanthropy, people who have property investments, and insurance companies don't spend any time worrying about whether this is real. They just proceed as if it is. And you see that in insurance premiums, you see that in the need for the FEMA insurance flood program. So, there are parties with a lot of money on the line moving on this, and that might be compelled to help fund a solution.
Right, so some immediate steps being taken. Jack, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, thank you.